I think that one of the toughest battles in conversations with people and trying to get people to understand the libertarian vision is to understand ourselves and to find a way to communicate that we take something for granted that many people do not. The libertarian mentality is a non-entitlement mentality. The libertarian mentality presupposes a person's willingness to accept responsibility for his or her own existence. Now, unfortunately, there's a terrific amount of mileage to be derived from pandering to people's fear of self-responsibility. And politicians pander to it all the time, as we know. And many of the programs of the last several decades have been profoundly corrosive of people's self-esteem and self-respect. And we have created a nation with increasing numbers of people who have a dependency orientation and increasing numbers of people who really do think they are entitled to just about anything they think they need. They feel a sense of entitlement toward. And that is really a profoundly corrupting idea, and in fighting for libertarianism, we have to be absolutely clear that this is one of the most important battlegrounds. I remember being at the dinner party a month or two ago, and I was with a group of people that I didn't know, but I think were Democrats, quite nice people and interested people, people curious about libertarianism. And they asked me about the whole issue of health care and what I thought about the number of people who were uninsured, and how would libertarians address that problem. And I said, well, before we get into discussing how I would see, or how my fellow libertarians might see issues of that kind being addressed in a free society, let's go to a deeper level. Is it your conviction that health care is a natural right? And they looked nonplussed because they were kind of intelligent, decent people, and they didn't quite feel comfortable saying yes. Now, I know lots of I know lots of other people who would righteously say yes, but I don't hang out with those so much, you see. And so I said, and they said, well, a right. I said, here is something that libertarianism stands for. You can't have a natural right, meaning an unearned right, to something that somebody else has to produce. I said, now, however, healthcare is, after all, a service, a product that somebody has to bring into existence. And in our view, you can't have a right to that just from the fact that you're born. Because look at the position that it puts for the people from whom you are to collect this right. They become your serfs, and I don't think any of you at this table, I said with my usual diplomacy, want to stand up for such a viewpoint. And it was really a satisfying evening, because they said, could you send us some literature on our need to be very, very clear and even compassionate when we're talking to people who don't share our views, that we are offering something, we are talking about something which to most people is incomprehensibly radical. I'm in an interesting position. I have a lot of friends who are Democrats, and they're nice people, and they love me. And but they're mystified by me, because, you know, they can't think of me in the terms that they usually would think of people with whom they politically disagree, because they know me personally. So, and they'll often say, how is that again, Nathaniel? Would you tell me that one more time? And I can see they are really struggling. The idea of a non-coercive society, the idea of a voluntaristic society in which people would absolutely not have the right to impose their values on other people, it's just like a fantasy. It's like it's totally outside the intellectual range. And these are very, very smart people. I am friendly with Democrats, but not with dumb Democrats. Okay? And so, what we are up against, as I see it, is the challenge of helping people to understand that many of the tenets that the best parents would teach their children, applied politically, would lead straight to libertarianism. Now think about that. Suppose you said to a parent, do you want your children to grow up taking responsibility for their own choices and actions? You bet I do. Do you want to raise children who will understand that in human relationships they've got to carry their own weight and earn their own way? Of course I do. I don't want my kids to be bums. Do you want your children to grow up feeling that they ought to earn whatever it is they want out of life? Of course I do. Do you want your children to grow up feeling the world owes them a living? Absolutely not. Do you want your children to grow up feeling that they're entitled to what other people have produced without any effort on their part? Of course not. Well, if you think about those ideas and apply them consistently, they won't lead you to socialism. They'll only lead you to libertarianism. So, one of the ways that I find it helpful to get people to at least understand what libertarianism is about is building bridges between an arena where they do understand self-responsibility and showing how it applies in an area where they haven't thought about it applying. You see, nobody that I ever met is against self-responsibility totally. We all have areas, including us, I guess, where we are more self-responsible, and probably other areas where we are less self-responsible. I mean, we can be, for example, a person can be a dynamo of self-responsibility in the office and come home at 5 o'clock and turn into an emotional 5-year-old. You may have heard of that phenomenon. So, everybody is in favor of self-responsibility in some respects, and few people understand its application consistently. I used to tell this story many years ago. Maybe you'll find it useful. Let's imagine that we were just starting out with the United States of America. And everything was pretty much as it was, except with one exception. It was taken as a foregone conclusion that one of the proper responsibilities of the government was to provide people with shoes. This was almost regarded as common sense, because we certainly didn't want our citizens to walk around shoeless. And then suppose some crazy radical would come along and he would say, or she would say, I don't think the government should provide shoes. I think we should privatize the whole issue of shoes. And people would say, are you crazy? Have you no compassion? Do you want a world of poor people, little children walking around barefoot? What kind of a person are you? Because it would be totally outside their mental orbit. Now, that was a mistake we didn't make. And shoes were left in the hands of shoe manufacturers. And it's done a pretty good job. We don't see a nation of half shoeless people. The great contribution that I see in the Libertarian for the Libertarian Party is in opening up people's awareness that there is an alternative to the varieties of statism offered by our two major parties. To making people aware there is another way to look at social problems. There is another way to approach social organization. One of the things, before I came down to talk tonight, I was reading the draft of your platform. And one thing on it made me very happy to read. And that was the line about the abolition of corporate welfare. Because one of the many things that appalls me about most Republicans is on the one hand, what a great opportunity they had a few years back, and how miserably they betrayed it, as they always seem to. If you want to fight for libertarianism, and you want people to take you seriously and not see you as the voice of, quote, big business, and if you have any integrity at all, you don't begin with food stamps. You begin with corporate welfare. You leave food stamps to last. If you really mean business, and you want people to understand that you really are a new voice and not just more same old, same old.